dust clawed at the sky like smoke from an invisible fire. The dry wind howled over the open plains, lifting grit and blood and memory. A woman's scream ripped through the stillness, raw, hoarse, half-choked by sand, as her body jolted behind two galloping horses. Her arms lashed at the wrists with coarse rope stretched unnaturally. Her knees and back scraped along the hard-packed dirt, leaving a trail of torn skin, ripped fabric, and crimson streaks in the desert earth. She wasn't supposed to survive this. But she hadn't died yet. The settlers watched from the edge of the trail, their wagons still in a crooked line. Some covered their children's eyes. Others turned away with grim indifference, their faces pinched in disapproval. A few stared, curious, hungry for the justice of humiliation. The woman's name was Eleanor Ridge, 26 years old. She had once lit the candles at the church altar, taught the girls to sing hymns, and wiped dirt from her preacher husband's boots. Now, she was being dragged like an animal because someone had whispered she gave comfort to the enemy. Comanche child in her care, a food bundle hidden in the barn. A hand laid gently on a wounded warrior's chest. It didn't take much to hang a woman in this land. And it took even less to tie her to a horse and call it justice. They called me a whore. Her mind rasped in rhythm with every bounce against the dirt. They said I lay with the enemy. Maybe I did, or maybe I just refused to let hate decide who deserves mercy. The memory came jagged in flashes. The night they burned her husband alive. The heat of the torches. The noose they tossed at her feet. The scream of the child she'd tried to save. The silence of the crowd. Her body shook with every lurch of the horse. Her fingers clutched the rope just to feel something she could still hold. Pain became her only tether to the living. The sky above offered no mercy, just an endless stretch of pale, washed-out blue. The land around her was stripped bare, as if war itself had carved it from bone. Charred tree stumps jutted from the earth like broken teeth. Buffalo carcasses rotted in the sun. Abandoned wagons rusted along the trail, their axles snapped and their contents long picked clean. She passed a pile of ashes, once a Comanche camp. Nothing remained now but blackened stones and a child's broken doll, half buried in the dust. Death had no flags out here, just silence. And Ashdot, the men who dragged her were part of the Miller gang, self-proclaimed cleansers of God's soil. 4 of them rode ahead, hooting and laughing, tossing back whiskey like it was communion. The 5th, Eli Miller, had the reins tied to his saddle. His face was sunburnt and grinning. A rifle hung at his back like an afterthought. Let the Injuns see what happens to a preacher's bitch who opens her legs to savages. He called out, spitting over his shoulder. She even alive? One of them laughed. Who cares? Another shouted. Her body'll still say what needs saying. Leave it near the bluff. Let the redskins dig her up. The rope jerked again. Eleanor's mouth filled with grit, her vision blurred. Blood from her forehead had matted her hair into a mask. Somewhere in the back of her mind, a song drifted, her mother's hymn. Something soft and aching. She couldn't remember the words. She knew she was close to the edge, of land, of life, of... The breath left in her lungs, then the horses stopped, the rope slackened. Her body collapsed into the dirt like a dropped rag. She gasped, unable to scream anymore. Her ears rang. Her throat was scorched. What the hell? One of the men muttered. Silence swept over them. The kind that wasn't natural. The kind. That meant someone was watching. Dust rolled away ahead of them, parting like a veil. And there, standing alone in the trail, was a man, a figure, motionless, as if carved from the rock itself. He wore no shirt, just a necklace of bone and obsidian. Braided hair that hung like storm ropes across his shoulders, and eyes so still they made the horses step back. A tomahawk hung loosely at his side. His skin, sun-worn and scarred, gleamed like iron under the white sun. The wind shifted. No one spoke. The Miller gang froze, not because they feared one man, but because the land itself seemed to hold its breath. The horses neighed. One backed up, snorting. The rope tugged taut again, making Eleanor groan. Eli raised his chin. You? Lost, Redskin? He barked. Still the man didn't move. Didn't blink. And then, slow as dusk, he stepped forward, his boots crushed the dust. He walked without fear, toward them, toward the girl bleeding in the dirt. He stopped no more. Then 20 paces away, and knelt with deliberate calm, he drew a short blade from his belt, reached down, and dragged its tip in the dirt, a line, a thin, deliberate scar in the earth between him and them. Then he stood. His voice was quiet, flat, final. "You cross this," he said, "and only one of us will return." The wind carried his words like thunder. Eli Miller spat in the dust, his grip tightening on the rifle strapped across his back. The others looked between him and the Comanche, no one daring to move first. Then one of them, Caleb, the youngest, kicked his heels into his horse and charged forward, yelling, "I'll gut him." The rider surged past the line in the dirt. The Comanche didn't flinch. In a flash of motion too fast for thought, the warrior dropped low, rolled beneath the horse's legs, and with a single swing of his tomahawk, slashed deep into the animal's front leg. The horse screamed, buckled, and crashed forward, sending Caleb sprawling. Dust exploded around him as the Comanche rose to his feet like smoke rising from fire. The other men reeled back, startled and cursing. Caleb cried out, clutching his twisted leg beneath the wounded horse's body. Eli hesitated, then raised his rifle, but before he could aim, the Comanche was already in front of him. Not with the tomahawk, with a knife. He grabbed Eli's collar, yanked him down, and with eerie calm carved a simple mark into the man's forehead, a small, curved symbol. "Coward." He shoved Eli back. Blood trickled down the man's face. No more words, no more warnings. The gang mounted quickly. One pulled Caleb up behind him. They fled in a flurry of curses and pounding hooves, kicking dust into the wind. The Comanche stood alone in the settling silence. Then he turned and walked to Eleanor. She lay limp, barely breathing. Her face was streaked with blood and dust. Her eyes fluttered but didn't see. Gently, reverently, he knelt, cut the rope at her wrists, scooped her into his arms. Her head rolled against his chest as her breath trembled, and then her vision blurred into darkness. Dirt, sky, dust, silence. The next thing Eleanor felt was warmth, a low, crackling fire, the scent of burning sage and wet earth. Her body ached in ways she hadn't known were possible. Her wrists burned, her knees were torn open, her lips were cracked. She opened her eyes slowly. They were inside a cave, not deep, just enough to shield them from the wind. Thin rays of early light spilled through the entrance, painting the stone walls in soft gold. She tried to move. A sharp pain lanced through her ribs, and she gasped. A shadow moved. He was there, the Comanche warrior, squatting near the fire, holding a handful of green herbs in his palm. He pressed them into a wet cloth, then turned to her. His expression didn't change. He didn't speak. He knelt beside her, lifted her arm, and wrapped the cloth around a gash with practiced care. The pain burned, but his touch was steady, precise. She watched his hands, rough, strong, but not cruel. Her eyes welled. He paused, sensing her stare, then stood and walked back to the fire. No words, only the sound of breath, the rustle of cloth, the faint pop of wood and flame. Eleanor drifted in and out of sleep, her dreams a storm of fire and faces. She saw her husband, burned, silent, eyes still full of trust. She heard the wail of the Comanche children taken by soldiers. She saw herself holding a bloodied cloth in a field, begging a stranger to live. The past clung to her like the dust still matted in her hair. When she woke again, it was darker. The fire was low. Her wounds had been cleaned. A flask of water sat beside her, with a bite of dried meat wrapped in a leaf. She sipped the water, winced, drank again. Then she looked at him, truly looked. He was sitting near the cave's mouth, facing away, his legs crossed, a long blade in his lap, which he sharpened slowly on a stone. The moonlight caught the lines in his face, not old, but not young either. A man who had seen too much and said too little. His necklace caught her eye. It wasn't. Decorative bone, leather, and a wooden charm near the center. Carved into it, faint but deliberate. Tohano. His name, she whispered it once, softly, testing the shape of it on her tongue. He didn't turn. She didn't speak again. For 2 days. They didn't exchange a word. He brought her water in a gourd made from a hollowed-out fruit. He set it gently beside her. She winced when she reached for it. Her fingers trembled. He stepped in, steadied her arm. Their eyes met for half a breath, then looked away. At night, when the desert wind grew cruel, she would shiver uncontrollably. Once, she cried in her sleep, not knowing why. Maybe from pain. Maybe from everything else. She woke to a buffalo hide gently placed over her shoulders. When morning came, she sat up slowly and began to hum a tune. A hymn, broken and soft, the only one she still remembered. He paused, his blade sharpening. Didn't move, just listened. It was something. A thread in the silence. Later that day he caught a rabbit. Skinned it clean, cooked it over the fire, and left her the larger half. She didn't speak. She nodded once. He didn't return the gesture, but something changed in his stillness, a kind of trust that didn't require words. That night, the stars burned like holes torn in the black. She looked over at him, sitting upright, eyes open but distant, watching the horizon through the mouth of the cave. Why did you save me? She finally asked, voice raw. He didn't answer at first. Then softly, without looking at her, because no one else did. The first thing Eleanor noticed was the smell. Smoke, faint but sharp, like cedar burning too fast. She sat up slowly on the cave floor, squinting toward the pale morning light at the entrance. Tahano stood like stone against the sky, his body a silhouette framed by the early sun. His eyes were locked to the horizon. What is it? She asked, her voice thin. He didn't answer right away. His eyes scanned the distance with quiet calculation. Then he turned slightly, just enough for her to see the tension in his jaw. Riders, he said. Settlers, 5, maybe 6. Eleanor moved beside him, shielding her eyes. And then she saw it, the faint trail of dust rising behind silhouettes on horseback, one of the horses. She recognized it, a pale buckskin with a torn ear. Eli. Miller's mount. Her pulse quickened. That's them, she breathed. The ones who... Her voice failed. Tahano's gaze didn't shift. They are hunting, he said. Looking for your body, or to make sure there's nothing left of it. Her breath turned ragged. They'll find this place. Burn it. Burn everything. Tahano nodded once. They have burned many things. He turned to her. His tone was steady, but final. Take the small horse, ride west. Stay ahead of them. You'll reach the cliffs by dusk. You live. Eleanor looked at him, the curve of his jaw, the dried blood still staining the sleeve of his tunic, the quiet certainty in his eyes. You're not coming? She asked. I go east. They follow me. They will not catch us both. She shook her head. Her fists clenched in her lap. She felt heat rush up her spine, not from fear, but from something that had been buried under weeks of pain. No, she said. Tahano tilted his head. I'm not running. Her voice trembled, but she forced the words through her teeth. I've already been buried once. I'm not going into the ground again without dragging them with me. Tahano didn't answer, not with words. But something in his expression shifted, just slightly. He stepped forward and held out a blade. Its handle was worn smooth, the edge clean and sharp. Then learn to kill, he said, that night. Eleanor sat across the fire from him, her fingers tracing the hilt of the blade he'd given her, the warmth of the fire dancing in her eyes. The pain in her shoulder flared again, and this time she didn't wince. She rolled back the fabric of her dress, exposing the scar that had never healed properly, a raised, angry mark on her skin, just above the collarbone, A.B., crooked and brutal. The memory came back like a brand against her ribs. They'd tied her to a fence post in the middle of the square. Not the men, the women, the wives of those who called themselves good Christians, her friends, her choir girls. They shouted slurs, spat on her, called her a disgrace. She lay with redskins, they cried. She betrayed her blood. She let one touch her. She smiled while they died. They'd pressed the brand to her shoulder as her screams echoed. Off the church walls, B for betrayer, and when they walked away, she remembered the smallest girl, Anna Miller, turning back once with a look of confusion. Not hate, just confusion. As if unsure what side she was supposed to be on. Eleanor's fingers touched the scar now like it was a map she finally understood. Tahano tossed another log into the fire. Sparks crackled and rose. "Teach me," she said quietly. He nodded. In the morning, he showed her how to stand, how to hold the blade low, not high, how to move her weight with her hips, not just her hands. She practiced on the shadow of the cliff face. At night, they tracked the Miller gang's path by broken brush and dropped whiskey bottles. She spotted the tracks before he did once. He smiled, the first time she'd seen it. They didn't speak much, but on the fourth night, by the fire, she began to hum again, the same hymn as before, this time clearer. Tahano sat closer. "You sing like winter rain," he said softly, rare but soft. She looked over. His eyes were fixed on the fire, but there was something gentle in his voice, a stillness that wasn't cold. Any more? She didn't reply, but she didn't stop singing. The next night, they found the camp. Down in a hollow near a creek bed. The Miller gang was sprawled around a dying fire, their laughter sharp and full of drink. One man pissed against a rock, another cursed it at a stubborn mule. Eli sat sharpening his rifle sight with a flint. Eleanor crouched beside Tahano on the ridge above, her breath slow and shallow. Her hand gripped the knife hilt under her coat. She saw the one who had spat on her, who had held her down while the others laughed. She leaned forward, ready to move. Tahano placed a hand on her wrist. Firm, still, she looked at him. His voice was barely a whisper. "Not yet," he said. "Wait until they feel safe." She frowned. "And then?" He looked at her, his eyes like night fire. "Then we burn their peace." The firelight flickered across sleeping faces, casting long shadows on the cracked earth. Laughter echoed faintly in the hollow, but it was dying, like everything these men had built from cruelty. Eleanor crouched in the brush above the camp, her breath still, blade in hand. Tahano knelt beside her, already moving before she could speak. He vanished into the dark like smoke. The first man never screamed, just a quiet gurgle as the tomahawk found his throat. Another stood, confused, just as the second blow dropped him into the fire. Panic bloomed, shouts, scrambling hands, boots slipping on dirt. Eleanor moved, heart pounding, every footfall silent. She passed one man crawling through the brush. She didn't stop. Her eyes were fixed on the one by the wagon, Eli Miller, fumbling for his rifle. He looked up. Saw her. And froze, his face twisted with recognition. "Well," he hissed, "still alive after all." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. By the fire, one of the irons they'd used to brand her still sat buried in the coals, red hot, pulsing like a wound. She grabbed it, and before he could speak again, before he could lift the gun, she slammed it across his cheek. He screamed, fell to the ground. The iron hissed against skin. She knelt over him, breathing hard, her face inches from his. "Now you're what you made me," she whispered. Gunfire cracked behind her. Dust flew. Tahano moved like a shadow, fast, precise. Two more dropped. One man fled into the darkness, disappearing into the trees, never looking back. The others didn't get the chance. The camp burned quiet. Eli whimpered, curled against the wagon, face half melted. She stood, blade still warm in her hand. Tahano was bleeding from his side, but he stood tall, chest rising slow and steady. Their eyes met, and something passed between them. Not triumph. Not revenge. Something older, heavier. Finished. She helped him walk. They found a stone outcropping just past the creek, quiet and still. She tore strips from her skirt to bind his wound, her hands trembling not from fear, but tenderness. Then together they buried the iron beneath a slab of earth. No cross, no marker. Just a grave for what had been done. The next morning, the sky was washed clean, pale gold, cool. They sat near the riverbed, legs dangling over the rocks. The land stretched out wide and wild before them. Tahano reached into his satchel and pulled out a string of beads, hand-woven, humble, yet intricate. Intertwined in the strands were threads from her old dress, torn fabric, stained but still hers. He offered it to her. "Now you wear what they tried to tear," he said. She looked at him, tears filling her eyes. Not from pain, she placed her hand over his. No kiss followed, just quiet, full of meaning. I still have to go back, she said at last. That town, they still whisper lies. He nodded. Then I'll ride behind you, he said. Just out of sight. She smiled. I'd like that. And then she mounted the small horse, the same one she would have ridden to safety, but now she rode it not to escape, but to return. To confront what was left behind. To live. The sun crested the horizon, painting the desert in fire and promise. Eleanor rode forward, dust curling behind her hooves. On the ridge, Tohano stood watching, still, silent, a guardian written in bone and dust. Her voice echoed softly in her mind, full of warmth and ache. I was broken, but in the dust I found someone who saw the cracks, and still stood beside me. Call to action. If this story moved you, if it made you angry, if it made you hope, then share it. These stories of the forgotten, the broken, the brave, they deserve to be told. Don't forget to comment your thoughts below, and subscribe for more powerful frontier stories every single week. Until next time, ride steady and never. Stay silent when you see someone being dragged through the dust.